I'm Charlie Bright of Gold Derby, and today I'm speaking with Lauren Domino, the producer of the new documentary American Symphony, as part of our Meet the Experts film documentary panel. First question I wanted to ask you is, I was doing a little bit of research, and is it true that you have a familial connection to Jon Batiste?
I do. That's actually why I signed on to the project. I was doing a lot of work on ancestral connection and legacy. And my uncle, Kid Jordan, was one of Jon Batiste's first music teachers here in New Orleans. I'm from New Orleans, and it just felt really important in helping to tell just a part of Jon's story. It helps the legacy of all of the people who've impacted his life continue to live on. So yeah, it's, New Orleans is a city of a lot of great musical family. So I'm very proud to be from here and to have that sense of connection and deeper meaning, to this project. And one thing that we say about American Symphony is that it's bigger than all of us. And for me, that was a big key state point.
I mean, what did it mean a lot to specifically be profiling someone who also came out of New Orleans and the scene there that I'm sure you're very familiar with and continue to be very familiar with?
It did, but I think for me, what draws me to documentary film is just the power of people's personal stories and how we can connect, and it helps us understand ourselves at a deeper level. So when I look at Jon, not only being from New Orleans, but just the way that he can treat music as a vessel, and really there's power in the way that he performs. And Suleika, in her writing and in her art, and just the way that they move through the world, through the ups and downs of life, to me felt so inspiring. And it's really helped me, and I hope audiences just glean a little bit more about how we see ourselves and how we can also move through the difficult ups and downs of the world and life.
So you are the producer of this movie. That was directed by Matthew Heineman. I'm curious as to, how did Matthew Heineman become interested in Jon Batiste and thinking that he would make an interesting subject for a documentary film?
Yeah, so I am one of the producers along with Jodan Okun. I want to shout him out. And Matthew wishes that he could be here today. Let me just get that out of the way. But you have me instead. So Matthew came to the project. Jon actually did the score for Matthew's film, The First Wave. And they met just through the process of working on the score for that movie. And then Jon approached Matthew about, he was going to go build this symphony. And initially the idea for the film was they were going to travel around and find different orchestra members to perform in this great reshaping of the symphony through an American lens in 2023. But through the course of, what Matthew always likes to say is, if you start out making the movie that you thought you were making, you're not doing something right. And, my shift on that is really, if you start anything in life with a plan and it doesn't expand, you're not doing something right. So naturally, the project just expanded and unfolded in a really beautiful, beautiful way. But that was their initial connection.
Was he familiar? Was he? I know he worked with Jon with the scoring. Was he familiar with his music prior to that?
He was. I think that they initially met because Jon was doing a Love Riot during COVID, and he was just drawn to the music and was just like, wow, something really powerful is happening in the streets, and it's being led by this individual. I want to know him more. And then they got the opportunity to become friends and work together.
So was there any apprehension on the part of Batiste or Suleika, more importantly, when it came to opening their lives up, particularly following the news that they got that her cancer, I believe was leukemia, had returned?
Yes. So a big thing with documentaries that I think everyone on today's panel will say is that they're all rooted in a deep sense of trust. And I think that initially Suleika had some apprehension about, just being portrayed as the sick wife. They're opening themselves up to such a level of vulnerability on screen. So there was a little bit of apprehension and nervousness there. But at the end of the day, they really trust Matt and our team and knew that we do right by them and their story. So just the foundation of trust, I think, carried us through the entire process, even when people get nervous of being really just so vulnerable and so open for an audience. But I think Jon and Suleika also understand in their radical vulnerability that that's what people connect to and need to see, especially from people in the public eye. And it helps, again, it helps us understand ourselves and our lived experiences. So they were really, really game and really generous in their openness.
So the whole film, of course, climaxes with the premiere of the new Symphony being performed at Carnegie Hall. How complex was it to film Batiste's concert at that venue?
So the shoot at Carnegie Hall was extremely complex. We had 13 cameras. It was obviously like a live one night only performance, so we couldn't get anything wrong. And I won't give a full spoiler, but something happens in the concert that was, for us in the control room, like a pretty scary moment.
So that moment was not planned.
Oh
No,
no,
what you're talking about, because I was wondering.
If
Yeah,
you could see our blood pressure spikes, well, I feel like mine and Jodan's. Matt is used to filming in just really extreme high pressure, high stress situations. So
I talked to him for Retrograde, so yeah, I
yeah.
know.
So he was calm and like, just again, the level of trust of knowing that John is a professional. But on our end, in the production side, it was a huge panic because we have 13 cameras in a venue that is not used to having that level of filming. So the initial thought was like, oh my gosh, did we cause this to happen? And then that was cleared, but it was like, okay, wait, what do we do? We're losing sound. A big part of the symphony relies on this thing that happened and then it wasn't happening. So no, that was not planned, and it was only after in the edit that we could see the magic in it. But when it was happening in real time, it was definitely a peak panic moment.
One of the other crazy things that happens in the midst of the filming of this documentary was the Grammys. I believe it was in 2022, where John not only was the nomination leader, but ended up winning, I believe, five. Was it five or six?
I believe it was five.
Including the probably one of the biggest surprises, album of the year. Was the whole crew like kind of in shock with that when that ended up happening as much as he was, because it sort of like it just sort of like flew over his head when Lenny Kravitz said his name, kind of.
I think there was a surprise, but also just a knowingness. Like that album is incredible, and so many things were aligned for that to be his moment. Just I think in life, but Matt was there with him, so all of that shooting is just like Matt on his cell phone, and he got to be in that moment. So I want to say like there was surprise, but I think that we all knew, again, this project being bigger, we just trusted that great things were going to happen that night and that this was truly his year.
Were there any types of performances that you saw John give that Matt wanted to include in the documentary but wasn't able to for one reason or another?
Yeah, so Matt is a big believer in the power of verite, and with verite filmmaking, you're just shooting nonstop. So we had about 1,500 hours worth of footage. So there's a lot of just really amazing, beautiful moments, performances, moments of connection that just had to end up on the cutting room floor. But it's one of those projects that you're like, whoa, we could have really made 11 different movies with the amount of just extraordinary footage we had, and we had conversations early on of like, whoa, is this a series? Because there's so much good stuff here. But ultimately, in the edit, we just allowed ourselves to sit back and listen and let the story sort of move through us. And we ended up with the film that we have now.
And when it comes to when the first project was first brought to John, did he have any sort of apprehensions about how it might frame him in terms of how he works or anything like that?
No, I think that there was an openness. Again, it falls down to that aspect of trust. And John and Matt had built a relationship through working on First Wave, and they both trusted each other. And working with artists, they trusted the artistic process of the making of this film, that it was going to find its way. Like, as we all will state on this call, like, the artistic process has lots of like ups and downs, and then things figure out, and you just have to trust the flow of that. And I know John trusts that, but ultimately he really trusts Matt.
Well, Lauren, thank you so much for joining us. We wish you all the best, and we look forward to seeing you on our panel in just a little bit.
Yes, thank you so much.
I'm Charlie Bride with Gold Derby, and today I'm speaking with Moses Bwayo, the director of the new documentary Bobi Wine, The People's President, as part of Gold Derby's Meet the Experts film documentaries panel. First question I want to ask, and were you familiar with Bobi Wine's music prior to working on this film?
Thank you so much for having me, Charlie. And I feel quite blessed and honored to be here with these incredible films that you've put together. Yes. So when we started working on the film is co-directed by Christopher Sharp as well, and also he also produced the film. I had listened to Bobby's music growing up, and as an artist, he has always been a very consistent musician. So every 5 years in Uganda, the dictatorship they come together with like a group of musicians, and they take like the big ones and they do a big theme song for his campaign. Bobby has never joined this group of artists for years, and he's always, responded to the misrule in Uganda with a song. So he's been a very consistent musician, and yes, I loved his music. I've always listened to his music, and I continue to, yeah.
And you by the group of artists that you're talking about, they were doing a song for Museveni and his campaign and party, right?
Yes, so Museveni, with millions and millions of cash, he pays off many musicians to maybe 11 in number, and they do like one big theme song to support his dictatorship. Uganda is ruled by a dictatorship that has been in power now 37 years long.
So something that is Bobby still an elected member of parliament in Uganda?
No, so he when he ran for the presidency, he had to lose his seat as an MP, but he is the leader of the largest opposition political group in Uganda. Which, I mean, they should be in power. They won the election. Most of his members of parliament won their seats around the country, but there was heavy and there was rigging of unimaginable numbers to the point that in some electoral areas, the number of votes that the Museveni received, the dictator received, were way more than the registered voters in those regions. So clearly, they were just cooking up numbers. Yeah.
Does Bobby ever see himself returning to political office or trying to run again for political office?
So firstly, well, with this film, we would like Western audiences and really the keepers of democracy to hold Uganda to account. The people who fund Uganda, the US government gives Uganda to the tune of $1 billion. The EU gives an equal amount to Uganda, and we would like for this film to raise some awareness on the situation in Uganda. And with that, we hope that there will be election. There will be a fair election with observers from the West that will put preconditions to this aid. That will push the government to have a free and fair election. That's the only thing that will have Bobby to run again. But he doesn't want the same thing to happen as before. People kidnapped and disappeared, and it was a very violent election that he hopes is not the same. Yeah.
Well, that actually brings me to my next question. The scenes where Bobby is campaigning and runs into interference from the military, not even the police, but the actual military. being used to silence him and arrest him. How I have to wonder, how much danger did you and the crew find yourself in during the peak of that presidential campaign?
So I've been following Bobi Wine for this film since 2017. So it's been 5 years in the making, and through those 5 years, in fact, yes, at the beginning the violence was happening to politicians and their supporters, but close to the election, this violence was meted upon journalists, filmmakers, and myself. And I was arrested and locked up in prison for a couple of days, and arrested a couple of other times, just held in detention. And I was also shot in the face close to the election. Just three days after nomination, I was shot in the face. So some of these things were really to stop me from what I was doing, because I had been identified, this camera guy following Bobi. Bobi is like enemy number one of the dictatorship. So yeah, but it was an honor and blessing to witness this revolution and to see the people rise up, to dictatorship and fight for their rights, freedoms, and self-determination. Yeah.
I think you may have touched on this a little bit before, but do you feel it's possible to be optimistic about Uganda's future, at least politically?
Yes, I mean, with individuals like Bobi, really forward-thinking, and he's stepped up to the task, and he's leading, the largest opposition group. I mean, he's leading the largest political party. It's from a grassroots movement to now a political party. They very courageous and brave and forward-looking, and yes, we have hope if there can be free and fair elections. We have hope. And you see in the videos like Bobi continuously asking his supporters to remain nonviolent, and he's democratic looking. He wants to return to democracy. We hope that leaders like these will not be ignored, by the world, because the rise of totalitarianism is present today in the world in many places, as we all know. But yes, there's hope. There's hope. We have a lot of hope, and Ugandans are very resilient. History tells us that dictatorships never last and they never win. At the end of the day, the people of Uganda will be free and they will win. Yeah.
So just to touch on Museveni a bit, something I've always been curious about is how did Museveni come into power? Because he was just a couple of years after Idi Amin was deposed, correct?
Yes, so Museveni came into power in 1986 after a 5-year-long guerrilla war, which saw over 500,000 people died in that war. And he took over power from this guerrilla, from this guerrilla uprising, promising that there would be, he would have a return to democracy, that there was going to be a new path for the country. And in fact, the first 10 years or so were he was a very progressive leader. He was a darling of the West, in the region. He was implementing really great policies. In fact, I mean, he has hosted the former U.S. President Clinton, and so these were things that really showed that there was hope, and his government had hope. But after he came into power, he very quickly started turning from this individual he once spoke against. He famously, while in the bush, famously said, the problem of Africa is that it's not the people, it's not the situation in the country, it's the leaders that want to stay in power too long. Now, Museveni has done exactly the same thing. He has become a shadow of himself. And the country started derailing in 2005 when he removed the first. He changed the constitution and removed when he removed the term limits. We had a very good constitution that was actually written by a commission that he put in place himself. So the term limits were lost in 2005, and since then the country started derailing to this totalitarian military dictatorship that we have today. And in 2017, he removed the age limit, which was the final, impediment to his life rule. And now he's really a life president. Yeah.
Well, Moses, thank you so much for joining us. We wish you all the best, and we look forward to seeing you on our panel in just a little bit.
Thank you.
I'm Charlie Bright of Gold Derby, and today I'm speaking with Peter Nix, the director of the Apple original documentary Stephen Curry Underrated, as part of our Meet the Experts film documentary panel. One of the things that really makes this film work as well as it does is the way that you put together the clips of the college basketball games, especially during the tournament run in I guess it was 2009 or 2008. 2008. I was wondering if you could describe how you went about putting those clips together of the NCAA games.
First thing I did is hire a great editor, which editors have saved more than one documentary out there from the directors. But JD Marlowe just did a fantastic job. Working with the material. I think when you have an archival film, it's always a matter of sort of how you work with that material, how you treat the material. I don't make a lot of archival films. I mainly do cinema verite. I'm a cinema verite director and shooter. And so, I talked to JD early about, trying to think about the archival as verite, using like weird shots and sort of off angles, and stuff that might seem messy is generally the stuff that I'm more attracted to. And so we tried to establish that grammar. But what happened, going back to, I think Lauren had said it, that, and via Matt, that, where you begin is never where you end. And there were situations, the main thrust of sort of how the film ended was not planned at all. And the emergence of sort of how the then and now juxtaposed within the footage we shot with the archival was one of those magical things that we did discover in the edit. And when JD first sent me a clip of that juxtaposition, it kind of like sent chills down my spine. I was like, wow, that's really powerful.
I will say it was when I heard one of the players say that they were the Cinderella of that tournament, it always rings with me because I'm a graduate of George Mason University, and we were the 06 Cinderella in the NCAA tournament.
Exactly.
And don't let those VCU people tell you that they claim that title.
I think I remember that one.
So what made you want to tell Stephen's story?
I've been telling stories in the Bay Area for the bulk of my career, going back to my first film, The Waiting Room, which came out in 2012. And that's actually how I met my business partner, Ryan Coogler. He was making a film called Fruitvale Station. And Oscar Grant, who was in Fruitvale, was born and later died at Highland Hospital, where we were shooting The Waiting Room. And I think Ryan was trying to get access to shoot some scenes at the hospital. He couldn't get access. And so somebody at San Francisco Film Society connected us. And we, remained friends. Then when we started the company, I came on board to run his nonfiction division. And simultaneous to that, Steph had reached out to Ryan. Ryan's a huge Warriors fan and got to know Steph from the games. And I think it was the combination of sort of my sort of Bay Area documentary work plus Ryan sort of attracted Steph to us, and then I had to make the decision whether I wanted to direct this movie, because I tend not to do movies like this. I tend to do deeply immersive cinema verite social issue films. But the more I thought about it, and the more I got to know Steph, and thinking about my sort of work telling the story of Oakland, it was very much a story connected to the themes that I've explored in all of my films, which are generally centered around the power and resilience of community and family. And this story was very much aligned with that theme, and so the rest is history, so to speak.
I think one of the most striking things that we see in the documentary is the relationship that Curry had with his coach at Davidson, Bob McKillop. And I was wondering, and I'm curious as to what made that relationship between those two different than other relationships between college players and their coaches.
Coach McKillop emerged. We started noticing pretty early on that he was going to be a significant character. The significance of the role that he played in Steph's life. The concept of mentorship, and also this notion of the power of being seen. So much of sort of my work and Ryan's work is about the power and consequences of not being seen, and I think that played out in Oscar's life, and when his life was taken from him, and that plays out, and how people in Oakland, the uninsured, are stereotyped. When you're not seen in your full potential, can have damaging and lasting impacts on individuals and entire communities. And what we noticed with Steph's story was, obviously he's got a remarkable family, not just his parents, but like his grandma Candy, and that sort of support network that you recognize right away that this guy has a special relationship to family. But Coach really, he was the one person who saw Steph when so many other people did not see him for his full potential, and that was mainly, but we couldn't fit it into the film. We thought about doing it as like a text card after, but we decided against it. But he was very much like Steph, a small, undersized player from New York, working class, hard scrabble, who himself sort of like rose up against the odds. And so when he saw Steph for the first time, he could see in himself so much in Steph, and that's why he was the only coach to offer him a Division I scholarship.
I love that you highlight the family. My personal favorite part is when his two daughters are doing homework, he's writing his thesis, and his toddler son is jumping on the airbags. Yeah, I'm watching that going, yeah, I would be doing that too.
Yeah, he stole the scene 2 or 3 times in the movie. I mean, it's a classic thing. I mean, that's what I love. I like hanging out, just waiting for those moments that, sure, Steph was like, why are you filming this? But those are the moments that we live for as sort of observational documentarians. And sometimes you don't fully know until you get into the edit room whether a scene's going to be poignant or funny or relevant. But Steph and his family, to their credit, they tolerated us just hanging out at the house, shooting nothing. And ultimately those scenes found their way in with deep meaning, because like a big part of what was driving him was to fulfill this promise that he made to his mom years ago, that he was going to finish college. His mom was the first in her family to go to college. His kids were getting older. I think we met Riley probably when she was like Cannon's age, when Steph won his first championship, and he brought her up on the at the podium for the Q&A. And she's now almost a teenager, and so Steph recognized that his kids were getting older, and that it was time for him. That's why he wanted to make this film now. His career's not over, but he wanted to tell this part of his story now, partly for himself, but also for his kids.
I imagine you must have learned so much about Curry over the course of making this movie. For you, what was the most interesting thing that you learned about Steph over the time that you were making this?
I mean, I haven't been around a ton of like radically famous people. I mean, he's probably the most famous person I've spent time with. And, I was immediately struck by his presence. Like, he looks you right in the eye. He's very present. He's when we first met, pretty quickly, he got his phone out and he was showing me pictures from college, and him and his friends horsing around, and like the sense of nostalgia there. I knew like right there, like, oh, this is what he wants to share. This is what he wants people to know about. And one of those teammates, Jay Rich, is someone that's still in his orbit, and we recognize pretty quickly that he keeps people from that time around him, and that to me spoke a lot to his character. Family is very important to him. Friendship is very important to him. Community is very important to him. And those are all sort of themes that I've explored in different ways with my films, where a lot's at stake societally, but this was a very unique opportunity to sort of zoom in on, and sort of go beneath the surface of a celebrity that we generally only know through these like quick snippets, press conferences, and little moments that we see on television.
And Subway ads.
Or Subway ad, yeah, exactly. Which we had to film the Subway ad for that.
Yeah.
And that's when we ran into Spike Lee, so it was worth
it. Well, Pete, thank you so much for joining us. We wish you all the best, and we look forward to seeing you on our panel in just a little bit.
Awesome, thanks so much.
I'm Charlie Bright of Gold Derby, and today I'm speaking with Davis Guggenheim, the director of the Apple original documentary, Still, a Michael J. Fox movie, as part of our Meet the Experts film documentary panel. First question I want to ask is that what's really noticeable about this documentary is that you use actual like filmed recreations of certain events, but kind of from a distance, but you did film those. And I was curious as to what made you decide to actually film those recreations of the events in Michael's life.
Well, like a lot of the documentaries you're seeing this year, there are parts of the person's story that there weren't cameras there. And so there are parts of Michael's early life that that we just needed to capture. But we had an early instinct, which was, what if you could make a documentary that felt like a Michael J. Fox movie? And so we took that idea and we started using footage from his movies to portray. So the movie is actually a mix between some recreations and using some of his movies from the 80s, especially in ways you don't expect. And that's a tribute to Michael Hart, the editor, who was really my creative partner on this.
Was it ever a challenge to get because the thing about the movie is that the tone is, it kind of goes back and forth between comedy and tragedy. And was it ever a challenge to get the tone of the movie right in terms of how it feels, going back and forth between those two?
I love that question. And I think the tone, I was a student of David Milch, who did Deadwood. We did Deadwood together. We did NYPD Blue together. And his thing was all about tone. And finding the tone is always really hard and really important. The breakthrough was we were editing. There's a scene where Michael J. Fox wakes up in present day. He's in his early 60s. And we're used to remembering him as Marty McFly, but now you see him now and he's had Parkinson's for more than 30 years. And you see that his foot is tight and he's having a hard time putting his feet in his slippers, and then he's brushing his teeth and you see his hand shaking. And that's in there early in the movie intentionally to dispel people's intentions or to subvert people's intentions, which is to say they think they're going to watch, oh, it's a movie. It's a sad movie about a guy with Parkinson's. Because the next line is, I say to him, it wasn't when I was interviewing him, I wasn't thinking about this, but this is what Michael Hart and I put in the editing room, was I said, is this a sad sack story of a movie star that gets Parkinson's and it crushes him? And he takes this long pause and he goes, that's boring. And you see him walking to work and the movie goes on. So that tone comes from Michael J. Fox. He insists that you not pity him. He wants to be seen as a full dimensional human being, not a person with a disability.
So how did this project come about? Were you particularly a fan of Michael J. Fox prior to this? I mean, I don't really know anybody who isn't, but...
I was a casual fan. Michael Hart, the editor, was a rabid fan, and he has a great story about getting a hoverboard delivered to his apartment in Belfast, not Belfast, Dublin, and he's like, well, who sent me a hoverboard? And he went online and he realized that he was drunk the night before and had ordered it and forgot about it. He's such a rabid fan. But I came to me during COVID. To be honest with you, I was not looking for a movie. I was sort of in the middle of that winter, feeling sorry for myself, feeling like I was in a creative rut. And I just read an interview with Michael J. Fox and was just interested. And he had this terrible fall. He was running late for a Spike Lee movie. And he had this fall and he couldn't get up to reach the phone to call for not just an ambulance, but also to tell Spike Lee that he couldn't be there. And the way he wrote about it, the way he spoke about it was actually very witty and was a hint to the tone that you're talking about that we really wanted to capture in the movie. And I read it and I was like, wow, this could be a good movie.
I am very curious, how much Family Ties did you have to watch in order to find the right clips to use for this film?
Well, a lot of Family Ties and a lot of everything. I mean, and this goes back to Michael Hart. I think a good example is Spin City, where it's towards the end of the movie and he has Parkinson's, but he hasn't told anyone. Didn't tell Gary David Goldberg, the showrunner, the other producers, and yet his Parkinson's is getting worse. And he writes about it in his book that he was hiding, that he was his hand would be shaking if his medication ran out. And we went and we said, what if we could find that on the shows? And there's a sequence in the movie which is really quite extraordinary, which is, he's acting and he's being that charismatic character, but you could see his left hand twisting, or you could see him holding a piece holding an object in his hands that doesn't shake. And it's wild to think of using Spin City like Archive or like Verite, and that was, I think, an incredible breakthrough in our movie because he's a public figure and he's in all these TV shows. Why not in these movies? Why not use that as kind of an archive?
We see, of course, the film's about Michael. Well, we also see a good amount of Tracy. We didn't see as much of his 4 kids, and I'm just curious as to why we didn't see more of them in the film.
Well, there's my favorite scene in the movie, and at Sundance, it got the biggest laugh, is them in their kitchen.
Oh yeah, that's a great scene.
I think they're making quesadillas, and their kids are older now, so they weren't around. A lot of them. The youngest is I think was a sophomore or junior in college, and the rest are out. That's one reason. The other reason is that I think they're very private, and it's really Michael's story. And to the extent that we use his family is when he talks about how, they keep him honest, and I love what he says about, they don't treat him any differently. They treat him like the annoying dad with the dad jokes, and they're giving him crap in that scene. So I think we put in family that when the movie sort of asked for it,
Was there anything that Fox or Michael just didn't was touchy about including in the film in terms of footage you captured or a certain aspect of his life?
Everything. We put everything in we wanted. I had final cut, and then we had this one nervous moment because I always show my movies to the subjects. I want them to watch it, and also maybe there's something that they notice about it that we got wrong, or maybe there's a way they could improve. Like you don't. There's a photograph of that I forgot to give you. Sometimes it's additive. And there was this when I showed it to him. He goes, that scene when I come back to Family Ties after Back to the Future. He's the biggest movie star in the world. He's got Back to the Future and Teen Wolf, the number 1, number 2 movies of the summer, and the number 1 TV show. And he's kind of being a jerk. He is being a jerk. And he says, that footage you have of me being a total asshole? And I'm like, oh no. I'm like, we're gonna have an argument about this. And he goes, where'd you find that? I love that. And to me, that's a sign of there's something special about him, that he would, and Lauren alluded to this, Pete alluded to this, is the success of any of these movies is the openness of the characters who are in it and the trust that they have with you. And Michael just just opened himself up to me, and he had nothing to hide, and I think you see that in the movie.
Does he still like have that act, like that bug, like that acting bug in him, like he still wants to perform? Because I mean, you include some of the footage in your movie. You included the brilliant guest stint he did on Curb Your Enthusiasm, and he even won an Emmy for Rescue Me, for playing a really funny character on that. Does he still have that like sort of bug in him?
I was in New York last week, and I went up to his office, and we had a couple hours together, and he's still dropping one-liners. He's still wickedly funny. I think it's interesting. I think the one thing I learned on this movie, my movies in the past have been pretty serious. Not many laughs in my movies. A lot of laughs in this one, and I really appreciate. I really learned that humor isn't just something silly. There's the good humorists, and Michael, and I learned that Michael is one of them, are giving you a joke that is leading to some kind of pearl of wisdom, and I think that's him. Like it's getting to a truth that sort of the facts don't get you to, and I really appreciate that part of him.
Well, Davis, thank you so much for joining us. We wish you all the best, and we look forward to seeing you in our panel in just a little bit.
Thank you.
I'm Charlie Bright of Gold Derby, and today, as part of Gold Derby's Meet the Experts film documentary panel, we are speaking with Lauren Domino, one of the producers of American Symphony, Moses Bwayo, who's the co-director of Bobi Wine, The People's President, Peter Nix, the director of Stephen Curry Underrated, and Davis Guggenheim, the director of Still, a Michael J. Fox movie. I'm always curious to ask this of documentary filmmakers, and I love hearing the responses to this question. What was the first thing that you saw of documentary film where you had an inkling to yourself, yeah, that I want to do that? And I want to start with you, Peter.
Harlan County, USA, the Barbara Copples film about sort of labor in the coal mines. It just like blew me away. But both it's like access and just the artistry of the camera, like really, like just had a huge impact on sort of how I approached my own craft.
And what about you, Davis?
So my father made documentaries. His name
I was about to say you can't cheat and say one by your father.
So maybe I could talk about something else, but
I'm joking about that. I'm joking.
Yeah, but he, I remember I was 5 years old. He took me on a it was my first plane ride, and it was Robert Kennedy's plane as he was campaigning for president. And I don't remember magical filmmaking. I just remembered the circus of. I remember lights and cameras and saying, "This is the coolest thing I've ever seen in my life."
And what about you, Lauren?
I mean, that's like such a hard question. I think that mine's probably going to be like the Talking Heads concert films.
Oh, Stop Making Sense.
Stop Making Sense, because I just remember being like a kid and watching that and feeling like I was there, and just the feeling of feeling transported in films. And then, yeah, I mean, this is such a hard question. I feel like this is a question that you've got to prep us before, because there's so many on the list, and it's just like, older films that blew my mind, but it's just like so many. Everyone here's film blew my mind this year and like inspires me. So it's really it's a tough one.
Did you see it when it was re-released into theaters recently?
I have not seen the re-release in theaters, but a few years ago, I went to a screening that was essentially a dance party. And that was just a transcendent event. Yeah.
I will admit that when I was looking before we started, I was looking at my jacket. Sometimes when my shoulders are up here, I feel like David Byrne in those suits on the stage there.
It's such a classic, yeah.
And what about you, Moses?
I think, like Rory said, it's a hard question, but I'll try. So I grew up in a in a village 5,000 feet above sea level in eastern Uganda. And it was like just the bare minimum that we had growing up, and I really learned to observe life and to pay attention to my surroundings. So there was no electricity, there was no radio. I saw a TV for the first time. I think I was like 7 or something, and I saw a film for the first time. And we had just moved to a more like a city kind of region, and I saw a film by, it must have been like, it was a kung fu film, and later on I got to I realized that it was by what's his name, he made Hiroshima Mon Amour, and yeah, anyways, so it just stuck with me, and the early Hollywood cinema, with like karate films and kung fu, and so it really blew my mind. But I wanted to know how all this was made, and how could you capture that stuff, and but I was very drawn to the human aspect. So like I went on to do photography, and just observe people and take portraits, and that really kept inspiring me, and until today. Yeah.
There's so many layers to making a documentary. And another thing I'm always curious about with documentary filmmakers is, what is your personal favorite part of making these kinds of movies? And I want to start with you, Lauren.
My personal favorite part is just the people. There's just a tremendous set of people who show up every day to make documentary films with a level of openness and vulnerability. And, I think whenever you make something, it changes you. And when you sit with things like in our story, there's a lot to confront of like joy and sadness that with our amazing team of editors, we had to sit, and with Matt, and we talked about these things. And to me, it's just the people and the humanity of people and their openness just like constantly inspires me. So that's a part that is throughout the whole process, even until it's on screens and it's impacting people. The connective tissue of documentary filmmaking and building community is my favorite part, which feels general, but it touches everything.
And what about you, Pete?
It's a tie, because I can't pick just one thing.
We'll allow it.
And part of it's Lauren's answer. So the first, just the camera. I just love the camera. I love being behind the camera. I love the unexpected, being able to tell the story through the frame for me is been a big part of my process. And there's something about it that's just magical that I can't totally explain. And the feeling that I've gotten from sort of watching sort of incredible cinematographers like do their thing, it always kind of can elevate, especially cinematographers who aren't the director, can often elevate films far beyond what might have been possible. The other thing, and I honestly think it's part of what keeps me going, is the people, is connecting with audiences after the film is done is always it's probably the most powerful thing that I experience in the arc of sort of from idea to production to getting into a festival to finding a distributor, is just being and seeing people's reactions and having people come to me either immediately after the film plays, or years later, people saying I became a doctor because I saw The Waiting Room. So I mean that for me is something that's just very special for me.
And what about you, Moses?
For me, I think it's how you and this kind of relates to lots of what the fellow panelists have said. It's the aspect of how you start with a different, you start with a character, he's a different individual, and by the end of the film, like with our film, 5 years of seeing Bobi Wine and him and his wife, and how that changes, and just his personality and how he develops, and it's incredible, like just being present to observe that in the human, in a human being. I think that really interests me a lot. Yeah.
And Davis?
It's interesting. I was just thinking that each of these films is about a really fascinating human, and when I was growing up, the documentaries was new and exciting, and they would take you to places you couldn't go. Right? They had camera packs that allowed you to shoot without being plugged in. They had sync sound. They had portable lights. You could go into a location that has never been filmed before. That's all easy now. I think what's so the places that we're exploring now are humans.
Mm-hmm.
And for each of these films, and so that, to me, the favorite thing is spending 2 years getting to know a really fascinating human, and all the different, and it's hard to find a human being that isn't incredibly fascinating one way or the other. So that's the fun part for me.
For this last question, I just want to have a little bit of fun here. We are an awards site, and some of you here even have some experience with awards. I think one of the most intriguing things that can happen is the music that plays when you walk up, if you are announced as a winner. And I'm curious for you guys, what would be your ideal walk-up music if you were to win something? And Moses, I saw you smiling there, so I want to start with you.
We are Fighting for Freedom by Bobi Wine.
Absolutely. Pete?
I think I'm contractually obligated to say Big Fish in the Pond by Toby Nwigwe, who did the original song. No, I'm just kidding. Maybe it'd be like, so this is a fun fact. I was adopted, and my mom, when she picked me up from the adoption agency, and my name is Peter, Peter and the Wolf, the symphony Peter and the Wolf was playing on the car. So I'd probably roll that one.
I like it.
The oboe.
Davis?
It's a hard one. Maybe Back to the Future. The score from Back to the Future. It's featured prominently in the movie. It's a mysterious little cue, and it's such a celebration of him, and that score is a celebration of Michael J. Fox.
And it pumps you up. Yeah. And how about you, Lauren?
For me, it's obviously going to be a Jon Batiste song, because he's one of my favorite musicians of all time. And I would say it would be his latest song, It Never Went Away, because it's just such a beautiful love song and a testament to the power of love. And it is in my head all the time. I just constantly am singing it. So it would be my chance to bring back in the documentary love of karaoke, because I would definitely sing along as we walked on stage.
Well, that brings it full circle back to karaoke, as always. So thank you, Lauren, Moses, Peter, and Davis for joining us. We wish you all the best, and keep going to Gold Derby to make your predictions and lead up to this year's award season. Thanks so much, guys.
Thank you so much.
Thank you,
everybody.
Thanks, Charlie.
Bye.
Bye.